Leah, a black girl, slept in a field every night. When Officer Luke finds her, he becomes more strict. He crumbles as he hears her sad story, bringing tears to his eyes. How will this meeting change their lives? Before we begin the story, please inform us about your current location and whether you are enjoying it. Story. Don't forget to listen to Officer Luke's 911. The vehicle moved slowly through the quiet streets of the suburban neighborhood. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across a clean landscape. He mowed lawns and cleaned up homes. Luke's eyes scanned the area, alert for any signs. As he walked by the playground, he saw a girl swinging by herself with her dark hair in a knot. This made him think of danger. As the sun went down, she pumped her legs back and forth. Just another afternoon, Luke. My voice sounds rough even to me, he murmured to himself. He had worked for years and considered it as routine as brushing his teeth. As Luke continued his patrol, my thoughts went to his empty apartment. Nobody greeted him, there were no family photos, and there was no mess. He let out a sigh and felt a familiar pain in his chest. Luke had always put his job first because he thought he'd have time for his family later. But later, they never came. As the cop shook his head, he tried to push away the thoughts of being alone. Luke's police car turned a corner and vanished, leaving Leah alone in the growing darkness. As the afternoon was coming to a close, a cool breeze blew through Officer Luke's police car. He circled the playground area once more, taking his time to observe it. He saw the familiar scene, and then Luke's eyes met his. He looked around and saw a small figure curled up on the playground. He blinked, not sure if he was seeing right. But there was the little girl from before, sound asleep on the floor. Luke's heart skipped a beat. Something wasn't right. He stopped his car and stepped out, which made the pavement crack. As he approached the bench, he felt the gravel beneath his feet. "Hey there," he said softly, shaking the bench. "Girl's shoulder. Wake up, sweetheart." Leah's eyes opened wide. When she saw the cop standing over her, she was scared and confused. "It's okay," Luke told her. "Hi, my name is Luke, and I'm a cop. Why are you out here so late?" Leah slowly rubbed her eyes as she sat up. It was getting cold outside. She appeared petite and vulnerable in the cold. In the dim light of a nearby street lamp, she said, "I'm waiting for my mom." Luke rubbed his face and asked, "Where is she?" in a barely audible voice. She left to find work with a trembling lower lip, promising to return, but her tears returned. Her eyes welled up with tears. Luke felt a lump in his throat. He bent down to talk to the girl face to face. "Did she leave 5 days ago?" Leah said her voice hurt, and Luke's heart sank. He tried hard to keep a calm face because he didn't want to scare the girl. "Where is your home?" Leah looked down at her hands and said, "Sweetheart, we don't have one anymore." It was safe to play on the playground until she got back. The revelation hit Luke like a punch in the gut. He had been homeless and alone for days. He took a deep breath and tried to figure this out, information while keeping his cool. "What's your name?" we asked. Leah replied gently, her voice small and scared. Luke nodded, his mind rushing. He knew he had to help, but he didn't know how. "Leah, don't do it. We need to find you a warm place to sleep tonight," Leah said. As she told the story, tears came to her eyes. Mom told her to stay here. Her voice trembled as she vowed to return, embracing herself tightly against the chill. Luke could feel his heartbeat. It broke his heart to see the little girl in pain. He desperately wanted to comfort her, but after years of maintaining a professional distance since he was far away, he cleared his throat and asked, "Have you?" She had been sleeping somewhere nearby during her entire stay here. When it's dry, she looks up at the slide under there when it rains on the seat. Luke's eyes were wide with worry and hope. Do you think my mom will find me if I run away?" Luke was having a challenging time finding the right words to say. His normally serious attitude changed as he fought with his feelings. "Your mom wants you to be safe, and it's not safe for you to stay here by yourself right now, Leah." He stood up, his mind full of thoughts. "I'm going to help you through routines and rules. Okay, let's get you somewhere warm and safe." Tonight, Leah wasn't sure what to do. She looked around the playground that had been her home for days. Luke spoke less loudly and said, "If I promise, we'll look for your mum. As always, our first priority is to take care of you." Luke managed to get you there. As they drove to the station, he kept looking at Leah in the rearview mirror. She looked so beautiful. Luke led Leah to his desk. Small in stature, he lost his way in the back seat of the station. She grabbed an extra blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders. Luke watched Leah as she sat still and closed her eyes while he called social services. As he ran around the strange new place, he felt a strange pull at his heart, a protective instinct he hadn't felt before. Leah sat in the blanket Luke brought her and felt something she hadn't felt before. She gladly took a hot chocolate drink and a sandwich from the break room with her small hands. She took a sip of the warm drink, a little shaky. Luke watched her with worry on his face, weighed heavily on his mind, and made him feel things he normally kept inside, so he picked up the phone and called the number. To help with social issues. While he waited, Luke's eyes kept going back to Leah, who appeared frail, yet she exuded a quiet strength that deeply resonated with him. He decided right then and there that he wouldn't just hand her case off to someone else. He was going to investigate it himself in the loss of her mother. "Hello, this is Officer Luke from the 5th Precinct," he said. Finally, someone answered. As he talked about Leah's situation, he made notes on a piece of paper. After hanging up the phone, Luke wrote down thoughts for his own research on a piece of paper. Nell next to Leah's chair. "I made sure you have a safe place to stay tonight." Leah looked up at him with wide eyes. "I want you to know something important," he said in a soft voice. With his voice soft but firm, Luke said, "I promise you I'm going. I will do everything in my power to locate your mother and return her to you for the first time since he found her." Leah's face glowed with hope. Luke felt a knot in his stomach as he realized the depth of his pain. The little girl had quickly become significant to him. Luke stood up. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. They had steps to take. There were many unknowns to chase down. But when he saw Leah's trusting face, he quietly promised her again that he would not. He was determined to reunite this child with her mother, regardless of the difficulty of the search. Luke was working on a notebook full of ideas while sitting at his desk with stacks of papers all around him. He was diligently working on Leah's case, and his determination intensified daily. His phone was his constant companion. Hours of talking had worn out his voice as he made call after call. "If that's the case, I'm asking about..." He informed the manager of a nearby diner about a woman who appeared to be seeking employment. This was the 5th such call he had received. He'd made that morning, and every time the answer was the same. No one who looked like Nicole had been there. Luke rubbed his fatigued eyes and felt disappointment weigh on him. Not giving up, he kept seeing Leah's beaming face, which pushed him on. He called hospitals in nearby towns and even his old police school friends, who were now spread out. As the days turned into weeks, every dead end in the state felt like a personal failure. Luke found himself thinking about Leah more and more. He would go see her at the foster home where she was living. She brought her little treats and news about the search, showing her strength and unshakable faith that her mother would return, in a way that touched him deeply. One night, Luke was sitting in his police car when he caught himself staring. As he watched a mother and daughter walk down the street hand in hand, he felt a lump in his mouth. He whispered to himself, "What's happening to me? as tears welled up at the edges of his eyes. He wiped his eyes rough with Luke. He had always been proud of how well he could handle his feelings, but Leah's situation was making him lose it. He carefully built walls around himself and took down the picture of Nicole that Leah had given him. He looked at the happy face of Nicole, face of the mother who had left her daughter behind. Luke felt both angry and sorry for her. What could have pushed her to such desperate measures? On the other hand, he's not sure if the woman's face looks familiar. As Luke looked at the picture, he promised himself in his head that he would find Nicole, not only for Leah's sake, but also for his own peace of mind. This case was no longer just another study. It had become a personal goal that was shaping him in ways he didn't expect. Officer Luke visited Leah the next day. Luke sat across from Leah in the small room. The lights were very bright. "Are you okay? Are you okay?" Officer Luke asked Leah. Leah agreed, her voice softer than usual. She placed her small hands around him. Officer Luke leaned forward and said, "Thank you." He held out the warm mug. Leah's eyes lit up when he asked, "Can you tell me more about your mom? What do you remember about her?" "She describes her mother as the best mother ever," she says. "She sings to me before bed and makes silly faces to cheer me up. When I'm sad," Leah said. Luca felt his chest get tight as she spoke. He paid close attention and saw the mix of happiness and sadness on her young face. Leah works really hard, he thought. She would read me a story even when she was very tired when she got home. Luke nodded and encouraged her to share her favorite memory with him. Leah's smile got bigger. "Last summer we had a picnic in the park. Mom brought sandwiches and it was the best day ever when we fed the ducks." Suddenly Leah's smile went away. "I miss her so much, Officer Luke. I'm afraid I'll never see her again." Luke's heart broke, for he wanted to comfort the little girl but wasn't sure how to reach out to her, that he had been keeping between them emotionally for so long. Instead, he leaned in closer and spoke in a low, serious voice. "Please pay close attention. I promise I will keep looking for your mom, no matter how long it takes. I will do everything I can to find her and bring her back to you." Luke's eyes filled with tears as he said, "Really, you promise?" How strong his own feelings are. I promise we'll find her together in Luke's heart. Raced as he drove to the hospital. The lead felt good, and he couldn't help but follow it, but hoped this would be the big break they needed. As he parked his police car, he tried to calm down by taking a deep breath. Luke was nervous as he walked through the hospital doors. He went up to the front desk and asked, "Excuse me," while showing his pass. "Officer Luke, I need more information about a patient who was brought in after a car crash a few weeks ago." The nurse at the desk asked him, "Of course, officer. What can you tell me about the?" Luke told the nurse about the woman based on what Leah had told him. She quickly typed on her computer, her brow furrowed in focus. "Yes, we do have a patient who fits that description," she stated. After a moment, she said, "When they brought her in, she was in pretty bad shape. Let me check her current." Luke's heart was racing as he waited. He thought of Leah's happy face and begged in silence that it was her mother. "She's still here," the nurse finally told her. "Room 342, but I should tell you, officer, that she's been in a coma since the accident." Luke nodded and said, "Thank you," though his throat was tight. He then made his way to the third floor, which made Luke's mind race. What if this woman was Leah's mother? How would he tell her daughter that her mother was in a car? If it wasn't her, how would he tell everyone outside of room 342? Luke stopped, took another deep breath, and prepared himself for what he might find inside. Then, with a steady hand, she opened the door. The room was quiet except for the soft sound of the machine. Lucas looked at the woman in the bed. Her face was red and bruised. but she looked a lot like Leah Luke. Moved closer to look at her face more closely. The shape of her nose and the curve of her cheeks looked a lot like the heartbeat fast with a mix of hope and fear as he stood by the hospital bed with the little girl. He couldn't get rid of the feeling that made his heart race as he looked at the woman's face, even though it was hurt and swollen. He told the nurse who had followed him into the room that he knew her. "Can I see her record?" he asked. The nurse gave him a clipboard and nodded just above a whisper. Luke looked over the information, and all of a sudden there was a name in black and white that he hadn't seen in years. Nicole. The ground seemed to shake under him. Thompson Nicole. He breathed out as he held on to Nicole's clipboard, bringing back memories of high school parties, stolen kisses, and promises of forever. She had been his first love and high school sweetheart, and now she was lying to him. Luke fell asleep in a hospital bed and sank into the chair next to it. He was so emotional that he couldn't think straight. Looked at Nicole's face again, able to see past the wounds to the girl he used to know. He thought about what life had brought them to this point. At this very moment, everything fell into place. Nicole's eyes were Leah's eyes, so familiar and frightening. The daughter of the woman he had loved so much in the past was waiting at the station alone and scared. Nicole Luke took her hand and whispered, "What happened to you, the nurse?" She put a soothing hand on Luke's shoulder when she sensed that he was upset. "She had been here for weeks." Luke nodded as I softly told him that we had been looking for her family. Figuring out what was being said but not saying it, Nicole had been here asleep and by herself, able to talk to her daughter. He felt sorry for both of them because Nicole was fighting for her life and little Leah was patiently waiting for her mother to come home. At that moment, Luke felt full. He kept his word to Leah, and this wasn't just about putting a mother and daughter back together again. It was about Luke's thoughts racing as he thought about his own past and how to heal old wounds and make a new path forward. What was he going to tell Nicole when she woke up? How could he tell her that her daughter was safe but alone and scared? He felt the weight of duty on his shoulders as he looked at Nicole. She looked so weak and small. He slowly walked up to the hospital bed, which was surrounded by machines that were beeping. Sitting next to her, he said, "Nicole," taking her hand in his. "I don't know if you can hear me." "Hi, I'm here. I found Leah and made sure she was safe. I promised to take care of her." Luke spoke with a broken voice as he squeezed Nicole's hand. "Until you're better," he said. He barely tried to hear her, but the steady beep of the heart monitor was all she could hear. "Answer," a nurse walked into the room, waking Luke up from his thoughts. "Excuse me," he said, clearing his throat. "I knew Nicole a long time ago. Could you tell me more about her?" Situation that could wake up the nurse. Her eyes got softer. "She has been in a coma since the accident, which she described. We're hoping for the best. The doctors say she'll wake up soon, but there's no way to be sure." Luke nodded, and with a sad heart, he looked back at Nicole. He felt determination building in his chest. "I'll be back," he told her, "and I'll bring Leah. Let's get through this together." Luke left Nicole's hospital. He walked to the parking lot with a sad heart and a mind full of thoughts and feelings. Each step felt heavier than the last. When he reached his car, the weight of everything struck him, causing him to fall into the driver's seat without bothering to start the engine. He stared blankly at the wheel. How could he have let this happen? If only he had kept in touch with Nicole, things might have been different. Things would have been different. "I'm sorry, Nicole," he said in a whisper. "I should have been there for you when he found out who Nicole was." The shock made him feel dizzy and overwhelmed. He thought back to the humorous times they had in high school, the goals they had shared, and the vows they had made. He asked himself, how did we let this happen? In a deep voice filled with feeling. Whenever he thought about how they had grown apart after college, a wave of guilt came over him. Since then, years have passed, and neither had fought hard enough to stay in touch. Fate brought them back together in the most shocking and sad way. Luke took a deep breath and tried to prepare himself. He knew what he had to do. With a strong will, he got in his car and drove back to the hospital. He couldn't change what had happened, but he could change how he felt about it now. He watched with a fresh sense of purpose. He was no longer just helping any kid. This was important to him. Nicole was Leah's mother, so she wasn't just any little girl. Someone he used to care strongly about. Nicole took a deep breath and tried to calm down. He understood that he felt much more committed to helping Leah now than when he first promised to do so. He felt a strong desire to make things right for both Nicole and the little girl. "I promise I won't let you down again." He told Nicole, "I'll take care of Leah, and I'll be here for you when you wake up. We'll figure it out." Luke's mind was full of ways to help both Nicole and Leah as he sat there, but he knew it wouldn't work. He was determined to find a way to care for Leah while Nicole recovered, ensuring her safety and love. The enormity of the problem dawned on him once more. He was no longer simply Officer Luke. Luke was just doing his job. He was the man who could make things right. Luke returned to the police station with a heavy heart, knowing that two people desperately needed his help. As he strolled through the familiar halls, memories of Nicole and Leah flooded his mind. He took a deep breath to calm himself before entering the room where Leah was temporarily staying with social services. Leah's eyes lit up as she sat on a small couch and hugged a toy animal close to her chest. An animal close to her chest. Luke's stern face relaxed when he saw her. He sat down next to her and said, "Hi, Leah. How are you?" Leah looked up at him with eager eyes and asked, "Did you find my mom?" Luke clenched his teeth as he spoke in a soft but eager voice. He wanted to tell her everything so badly, but he knew it wasn't the right time. He needed further information about Nicole's health to ensure his decision was well informed. "Leah, any bad news that could make her sad?" "We're getting closer," he tried to assure her. Reassurance. "I promise we'll do everything we can to find her." Leah's face fell a little, but she bravely said, "Okay," and Luke felt a lump form in his throat. He reached out and uncomfortably patted her hand, still not used to showing love. "Hey," he said softly, "I know it's hard to wait, but you're very strong. Your mom would be proud of you." There were tears in Leah's eyes as she said, "I miss her so much." Luke's eyes hurt, and he cleared his throat to try to keep his composure. He talked at Nicole's. The doctors informed him about Nicole's condition, and his expression reflected their concern. Nicole was still healing, and it would take some time for her to wake up and reunite with Luke. Nicole worriedly asked Leah, "How long?" The doctor shook his head. "It's not that long." Luke responded with a nod and a tight jaw. He thanked the doctor and leaned against the hallway wall to assist them in managing the stress of the situation. His patience grew as they pressed down on him, but the sight of Leah's happy face only strengthened his resolve. He knew he had to be there for the girl during this tough time. Finding her mother was no longer enough. She needed support during the long wait. Luke went to Nicole's room every day and talked to her sleeping body. He would keep her up to date on Leah's health and then go back to the social center, where Leah eagerly waited for news. He would tell her, "I'm still waiting," and watch her face fall each time. "Your mom is getting better, people. We just need to wait." As the days went by, Luke, in order to get to know Leah better, would bring her little treats, like chocolate bars and coloring books. Anything to make her smile. He watched as she talked about her mom, her eyes lighting up with each memory. "Your mom sounds like a really special person," Luke said in a soft voice one afternoon. Leah agreed. I bet she can't wait to see you again." As he looked at Leah's brave smile, Luke quietly promised to bring this couple back together. He would help his family through anything, no matter how long it took. As the weeks went by, Leah and Luke began to form a special bond. As they sat down one afternoon, the shy little girl began to open up to the strict police officer. In the playground of the social center, Leah looked up at Luke with her big brown eyes. "Officer Luke, look at me," she said in a whisper. Luke turned around. Luke turned to her, his normally serious face relaxed. "Yes, Leah, I'm scared," she said, hugging him. Luke's heart ached when she uttered those words. "I promise, Leah, that we will do everything we can to find your mum. I know she wants to come back to you," he said with a deep breath. "I miss her so much sometimes. I worry that she left because of me." Occasionally, Luke couldn't resist the urge to reach out to her. Leah's hand with a soft pat. "No, sweetheart, that's not true at all." As Leah wiped away her tears, Luke said, "I'm sure your mum loves you a lot." His heart began to break through the wall he had built around it, and he found himself telling stories about the times in his childhood when he was scared or by himself. He smiled a little. "When I was your age, I used to be afraid of the dark." Can you believe that Leah laughed so hard that her eyes grew big? Luke laughed and shook his head, saying, "Leah, you're so brave." It's okay to feel that way. What matters is that we don't let our fears keep us from believing in positive things. Luke started to look forward to seeing Leah more and more as the days went by. He loved seeing her smile and laugh. Her tears brought back in him a sympathy he thought he had lost a long time ago. He recognized this and attempted to assist her. She was also helping this little girl by showing him how important it is to connect with other people. Luke sat at his desk and looked over the files he had collected about Nicole's life before the accident. His brow furrowed. His brow furrowed as he perused rental agreements, job records, and social service reports. The more he learned, the heavier his heart felt. Nicole had been managing shifts at a diner, a convenience store, and a third part-time job. Despite working at a diner and a cleaning service, Nicole's pay stub revealed that her earnings were barely sufficient to cover her rent and feed Luke. His grip tightened as he contemplated Nicole's struggle to meet her financial obligations. He discovered eviction papers and past due bills. It was clear from the papers that Nicole had been having a difficult time taking care of Leah Luke. His eyes were heavy with the knowledge. "How could I have let this happen?" he asked himself in a low voice. Luke felt awful as he thought about his high school days with Nicole. They were both so young and full of hope. He dreamed about how keeping in touch might have changed things. Could he have helped her? Could he have been there for Leah? The guilt gnawed at him, compelling him to drive himself to make things right. He knew he couldn't change the past, but he could make the future better. Luke promised Nicole and Leah that he would do anything to get them back together and make sure they never had to deal with him. Dove went back to his study with renewed energy and worked hard again. He reached out to Nicole's former bosses in an attempt to gain a deeper understanding of her situation. During the talk, each new revelation made him more determined to keep working. Luke thought about Nicole's sweet eyes and Leah's bright smile. He knew that he wanted to help them, more than duty or shame. Somewhere along the way, these two things became important to him in a way he couldn't explain. Luke saw Leah more often at the social services center, but he couldn't explain why. It was always a small treat, like a chocolate bar or a bright hair clip. Today he came in with a stuffed puppy under his arm. When he walked into the room, Leah's face lit up. Leah yelled with joy in her eyes, and Luke felt a warmth surge through his chest. He gave her the toy animal, and she hugged it tight. "How are you today, Leah?" he asked her softly. "Good," she said in a soft voice. I'm okay, but I really miss my mom. Have you found her? Luke took a big breath, though, because he knew this moment was going to happen. He sat down next to Leah, his heart heavy from telling her the news. With a soft yet steady voice, he began to tell Leah, I have some news about your mom. Hope and fear mixed in the little girl's eyes. Did you see that? Find her. Is she coming to get me? Luke slowly agreed. I did find her, but you should know that your mom was in an accident not long ago, which is why she couldn't come back to get you. Leah's bottom lip shook, and tears filled her eyes as she played on the playground. Is she okay? She whispered, holding the toy dog tight. Luke reached out and touched her. He reached out and put a gentle hand on her shoulder. She's getting better, he told her. The doctors are taking very good care of her. Take care of her, and she'll get better. It may take a while, but she will. Finally, Leah shed a tear or two. Luke could feel his eyes hurting as he watched her deal with it. He hoped he could protect her from this pain, but he knew it was best to be honest. I promise you, Leah, Luke said. He was adamant. Your mom will be okay, and you and your mom will be together again soon. Luke's heart broke upon witnessing her immense pain. What if Mommy doesn't come home? Leah choked out, get better, between sobs, and Luke swallowed hard to fight back his own tears. He had always been the tough cop, never displaying fear, but now he was demonstrating it. When he looked at this little girl's tear-stained face, he felt his walls fall apart. Leah, he said softly. He moved closer to her, saying, I know you're scared, and that's okay, after giving it some thought. He paused for a moment before gently placing his arm around her shoulders. To his surprise, Leah leaned into him for comfort. It was the first time Luke had spoken those words out loud in nearly a year. Years have passed, but I want you to know something very important. I will always be here for you. You're not alone. When Leah looked up at him, her eyes were big and wet with tears. Luke felt a lump form in his throat as she posed her question. Her voice was soft and sweet. Throat and nodded. For a moment he was unable to speak, but when he regained his voice, tears welled up in his eyes. I made a heartfelt promise to Leah. For the first time in his career, Luke let down his tough facade. He gave Leah a full hug and felt her little arms wrap around him in return. As he held her, he felt his own body relax. He whispered, It's going to be okay, as tears filled his eyes. He told himself and Leah, We're going to get through this together. As the days went by, Luke himself spent more and more time in the hospital, where he would sit next to Nicole's bed and quietly talk to her in the hopes that somehow things would get to her. One morning, when he walked into her room, he saw that Nicole's face had changed. Nicole's face had become more calm, and her breathing had become more steady. She was under the care of Dr. Chen Nicole. Dr. Chen Nicole smiled and said, Officer Luke, I have good news. Nicole's health has significantly improved, and we expect her to wake up soon. Luke felt his heart skip a beat, really. He asked, his voice full of hope. Dr. Chen agreed, saying that her vital signs are good and her brain activity is. Luke couldn't hold back his happiness. It seemed like any day now. Kindly thanked Dr. Chen, Professor F, and then ran outside to call Leah's social worker as fast as he could. Called the number, his hands shaking with excitement. Leah's mom is calling. Better, he told the social worker. We need to get ready for their reunion. While he worked, Luke's mind was racing. Thoughts of the upcoming meeting made him picture Leah's face lighting up when she saw her mother awake. Nicole's happy tears as she hugged her daughter made him feel warm in a way he hadn't in years. At the same time, along with the joy, there was a little fear. What if things went badly? What if Nicole wasn't there? Ready, Luke pushed these thoughts to the side and focused on the good things. I really need this, he told himself. They both do. Finally, the day came. Luke was sitting next to Nicole's bed when she started to move. He noticed her and put his hand on hers softly. She slowly woke up, and he could feel his heart racing as he watched her. "Nicole," he whispered, his voice full of hope and worry. Nicole slowly opened her eyes. She looked around in confusion as she blinked against the bright hospital lights. When her eyes fell on Luke, she recognized him, and she raised her voice to speak to him. "Is that really you?" Luke asked with tears in his eyes. "Yes, Nicole, it's me. You're in the hospital. Have been in an accident, but you'll be fine," Nicole said with a frown. To take in all of this information at once, Leah, her eyes grew wide with fear. "Where is my daughter?" Luke gently squeezed her hand and told her, "Leah is safe. It was in the playground that I found her after you left her. She was with social services while you were gone." Nicole's face lit up with tears of joy as she tried to calm down. She said in a whisper, "Thank God I wasn't going to leave you for a long time. I just needed to get a job and then the accident," Luke said. "Nicole, I know what you've been through because I've learned about it. You've been so strong while trying to take care of Leah by yourself." Nicole looked at Luke, her eyes filled with thanks. "I understand your confusion, but how did you find her? How did you know?" Luke told them how he had. He saw Leah on the playground and told her that he had been looking for Nicole. He also told her about the investigation that led him to find out who she was and how she was connected to Leah. As Luke finished, Nicole's eyes were filled with fresh tears. "I can't believe you did all that," she said. "For us," she said in a soft voice. "Thank you, Luke." Luke smiled back. "Nicole, Leah is such a great little girl. She's been so brave through everything." Nicole squeezed Luke's hand and said, "I promise I'll bring her to see you as soon as the doctors say you're well enough." Love-filled words came out of her mouth as she whispered, "I can't wait to see her." Luke left the hospital he felt a lot of different feelings in his chest. He was glad Nicole was awake, but he was scared to tell Leah the news. So as he drove to the social services center where she was staying, he practiced what he was going to say when he got there. Leah was drawing pictures in a quiet area when he walked in. When he got close, her eyes filled with a careful hope that Luke had seen a lot in hers over the past few weeks. "Leah," Luke said softly, "I have good news for you." He then kneeled down next to her. Leah sat down with her pencil and asked, "Is it about my mom?" Luke answered with a soft smile as his voice rose above a whisper across his face. "Yes, it's your mom. She's awake and getting better." Leah's eyes filled with tears as she asked to see you, and she sat still for a moment. She then threw her arms around Luke's neck and buried her face in his shoulder without notice. Luke was shocked. He thought about it for a moment before wrapping his arms around her small frame. "Really, Leah," she sobbed, but Luke's uniform hid her voice. "I'm really okay, yes, sweetheart," she said. Luke reassured Misty that she was going to be fine, and he did so with his own eyes, as soon as possible to see her. As Leah cried tears of happiness and relief, Luke felt something change inside him. He had built walls around his heart over the years, but they started to fall down when he understood how much this little girl and being mean to her mother. Leah finally pulled away and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Luke saw he had never seen her eyes light up like that before. It was like all the hope she had been hanging on to had suddenly gone out. "When can we go?" Leah asked hopefully. "Can we go now?" Luke laughed. "Not quite yet, Mum. The doctors want to make sure she's strong enough for I'll take you to see her as soon as they say it's okay. But I have guests coming over." Leah gave a serious nod and said, "Okay, I can wait a little longer. I've been waiting this long." Long right, Luke was proud of how brave she was. "That's right. You've been so. Being strong, Leah. Your mom will be so proud of you as they get ready for the seeing that his meeting was coming up." Luke thought about how much this experience had changed him. The police officer he was only a few weeks before seemed like a long time ago. In its own place was a man who had found his kindness and love again on the day of the meeting, arrived bright and full of promise. Luke woke up early, his heart racing as he drove to pick up his daughter. He carefully ironed his uniform because he wanted to look his best for this important day. Leah couldn't help but feel worried and excited at the same time when Luke showed up at the social service help center. Leah was already there, wearing her nicest clothes and having her hair pulled back. She held a small bunch of flowers she had picked from the garden at the center. When she saw Luke, her face lit up. Luke asked softly, "Are you ready?" With a smile that warmed his heart. Leah nodded and got down on her level. Her eyes were filled with a mix of hope and anxiety. She said in a whisper. Luke took her small hand and gave it a reassurance squeeze. "It's okay to be scared. Your mum is probably feeling the same way." Also, it seemed like the trip to the hospital would never end, and Leah sat quietly in the back. She was playing with the flower stems in her seat, and Luke kept looking at her in the rearview mirror, thinking about how he felt. As they pulled into the hospital parking lot, Luke could feel a whirling feeling inside him. Seeing how tense things were getting, he helped Leah get out of the car and walked with her to the door. Luke's grip on Leah's hand got tighter, and they rode the elevator in silence, with each floor bringing more excitement. When they got to Nicole's floor, they passed. Luke felt Leah. He looked down at her softly and said, "Don't worry, it's okay. Remember that your mum has also been waiting for this moment." Leah nodded bravely and took a deep breath. Then they walked down the long corridor, their steps resonating in the quiet hallway. When they got close to Nicole Cole's room, Leah slowed down and looked up at Luke. Luke got down on one knee next to her and gently put his hands on her. She opened her eyes wide with a mix of fear and joy. "Shoulder, Leah. You're so brave. Your mum is just behind that door," and she squeezed her flowers even tighter and said, "Can't wait to see you." Her voice was barely saying, "What if she's different? What if she doesn't know me?" Luke's heart raced. I laughed at what she said. "No matter what, she's still your mommy sweetheart." Leah's face lit up with happiness, tears forming in her eyes. "Mommy?" she exclaimed. Leah yelled. With tears in her eyes, she dropped the flowers and ran across the room, almost jumping onto the couch. Nicole sat her daughter down on the bed and pulled her close to her mother, who was waiting for her. I'm so sorry, she sobbed, her tears running freely. Leah hid her face in her mother's neck and sobbed, "I missed you so much, Mommy." They whimpered and cried as they held on to each other, as if they never wanted to let go again. Their tears mixed each time they held each other, years of love and desire poured out in that embrace. Luke. He stood still in the hallway and watched the scene play out in front of him, grow misty as he saw the strong reunion. He got a lump in his throat as he saw the pure love and relief on both of their faces. Nicole and Leah's faces, as the mother and daughter held on to each other. Luke felt a wave of feelings wash over him as he heard whispered words of love and encouragement. He was so relieved that he felt proud, knowing that he had succeeded in getting them back together. He helped bring this family back together, but there was more to it than that. When he watched Leah and Nicole, he felt warm inside. It was the satisfaction of knowing that they were better because of him. For the first time in years, Luke felt like he was part of something bigger. In the days after the passionate meeting, Luke found himself to be less than himself, deeply involved in helping Nicole and Leah rebuild their lives, while Nicole was still in the hospital getting better. Luke looked for a good place for the small family to live on his own. In his free time, he looked at apartments. He looked at rental ads and called owners, and his hard work paid off when he found a nice 2-bedroom apartment. Leah and Nicole were able to start their new life together in a great apartment close to the hospital. The story quickly spread through the community, and Luke was shocked by how much support there was. Neighborhoods, churches, and businesses in the area all stepped up to help. They gave people furniture, cooking goods, and more, even clothes for Nicole and Leah. On a sunny afternoon, Luke showed up at helpers were painting the walls of the new flat a happy color. Mrs. Johnson from down the street was putting together a small pile of given food in the kitchen, while Mr. Rodriguez, a local handyman, fixed a faucet that was leaking. Free. "I can't believe how kind everyone is," Luke said in a loud voice. With her eyes full of tears, Mrs. Johnson smiled at him kindly. "That's what community is all about." Luke watched the crowd and thought, "Dear, we take care of our own." There was activity going on around him, and he felt a warmth go through his chest. This was showing him a side of people that I saw so many people work together to help 2 strangers in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. Later that week, Luke went to see Nicole in the hospital to check on her and let her know how things were going. The work of the community made her cry, and she didn't know how to thank everyone. She whispered, and Luke squeezed her hand. Her voice choked with thanks. She held out a gentle hand. "You don't have to. They're just happy to help over the next." Luke worked hard for a few days to get everything ready. He cleaned Nicole's the social center gave Leah an apartment and stocked the fridge. They even bought her a few small toys because he wanted everything. For when they could finally go home, Luke noticed that something had changed in him. The pessimism that he no longer felt the stress that he had built up over years of being a police officer. Instead, he felt a renewed sense of purpose and link to the people he worked with. As Nicole's hospital release date got closer, Luke felt a mix of with both joy and nerves. He had become close to Nicole and Leah during this tough time, and he wanted everything had to be just right for their homecoming. On the day Nicole was released, Luke drove them to their new home. As they walked through the door of the apartment, Nicole let out a gasp of surprise at how cozy and friendly it was. "Luke," she said through tears, "this is more than I could have ever." The thought of Leah running from room to room made her face light up with happiness. "My own room," she yelled a few days later after Nicole and Leah had moved in and settled in. She invited him over for a small party. When he got there, the flat smelled like home-cooked food. As soft music played in the background, we wanted to say thank you for Nicole. She thanked Luke for everything he had done for them and gave him a warm hug as he walked in. Enjoying a tasty meal while laughing and telling stories, Luke felt a sense of belonging. As they were eating cake, Leah suddenly gave him a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in years. She jumped out of her chair and said, "Officer Luke, I have something for you." She ran to her room with high hopes, returned with a piece of paper in her hands. She gave it to Luke with a shy smile. Little voice said, "I made this for you." Luke took the paper and felt his breath catch. In his throat he had a crayon picture of 3 people joined together. The words, "My," were written above them in shaky, childish letters. Luke looked at the picture with tears in his eyes. It moved him deeply. The simple but meaningful act. He understood that he had gotten a lot more than he had thought possible from giving this little girl and her mother help. Luke spent more and more time with Nicole as the weeks went by, and Leah, that he often brought small gifts to their flat after his shifts. Give Leah treats or toys. The little girl's eyes would sparkle with happiness every time she saw him. Luke took Leah to the park on a sunny afternoon. As they walked hand in hand, Leah was shy and smiled at him. "Officer Luke, may I ask you something?" Luke's heart raced. Leah thought for a moment before answering. "Of course, sweetheart. What is it?" "Do you mind if I call you Dad from time to time? You care for me like a dad." Luke felt a lump in his throat as he bent down to Leah's level. Misty eyes. "Leah, I'd love it if you called me Dad. You're like a daughter to me." Wrapped her arms around Luke's neck and hugged him tight. Luke held her close, feeling a rush of love. As they continued their walk, Luke felt a sense of safety he had never felt before. He was amazed at how much his life had changed. He no longer felt lonely, which had been his steady friend for. He felt like he had a reason and a place in the world for so many years instead. Luke helped make dinner at Nicole and Leah's place, which warmed his heart. As they sat down to eat, the kitchen was full of laughter and the wonderful smell of home-cooked spaghetti. Nicole reached out to touch them, hugged Luke's hand and said, "Thank you for everything, Luke. You've become such an important part of our lives." Luke smiled. "You two have given me more than I thought for sure," he would say. "I feel like I finally have a yo," as the family ate. Leah happily talked about her day at school, and Nicole and Luke looked at each other with love. As the days went by, their bond grew stronger, giving them a sense of family that none of them had before. All of them were greatly loved and expected as the holiday season got closer. Holiday lights and decorations started to appear all over the neighborhood. Nicole and Leah's apartment was one evening when Luke helped Leah. The windows were decorated with twinkling lights and handmade paper snowflakes. Nicole walked up to him with a nice smile while doing her homework at the kitchen table. "Luke," she started, her voice softly, I was wondering if you'd like to spend Christmas with us this year." Luke looked up, amazed. He felt warm, but there was also a flicker of doubt in his mind. He had become close to Nicole and Leah over the past few months. Although they had been close for months, spending such a significant holiday together felt like a significant step forward. He paused and rubbed the back of his neck. "Are you sure I wouldn't?" Nicole didn't want to interfere with your family time, so she gently touched Luke's arm. "Luke, you are now family," she said. Leah's eyes lit up at the thought of having you here. "Please, Dad," she begged. That sweet phrase made Luke's heart flutter every time he heard it. It would be the best Christmas ever. "If you were here," Luke looked from Leah's hopeful face to Nicole's warm smile and felt a rush of emotion. The reason he wasn't ready was because he was afraid of taking on this new role in their lives. But as he sat there, he knew there was no other place he'd rather be than with this little family, full of love and warmth. He finally said, "Be okay." A smile spread across his face. "I'd love to spend Christmas with you both." Leah cheered and put her arms around Luke's neck. Nicole looked at Luke with awe. Luke's eyes sparkled with joyful tears as he hugged Leah back. He felt like he belonged. Officer Luke was no longer just a lonely police officer. He was now a part of something bigger. The small flat was lovely on Christmas Day, and the smell of roasted turkey filled the air. Luke arrived early, carrying numerous gifts and freshly baked pies. As they sat down to dinner, Nicole gave Leah a warm hug, and she squealed with joy. The table lit up with candelabra lights that bounced off the shiny ornaments on the nearby Christmas tree. Luke took a quick look around. Nicole smiled, and her eyes sparkled as she walked by in front of him. Leah, dressed in a bright red dress, was practically jumping in her seat as she savored a hot dish of mashed potatoes. Excited, they sat down to a meal full of laughter and happiness. They told stories, pulled crackers, and enjoyed it. Luke felt at peace in a way he hadn't in years, as he watched Nicole and Leah laugh over a silly joke. Just as they were finishing their main course, Leah stood up with her sparkling apple wine in her hand. She had a serious look on her face, but her eyes were full of love. "I want to make toast," she said, in a small but determined voice. Luke and Nicole then exchanged glances before looking at Leah in surprise. "I want to thank Officer Luke," she said, shaky. "You did not merely rescue me when I was alone. You became the family I never imagined I would have." Luke's mouth got tight as Leah went on. "You're not just a police officer to me anymore. You're my dad now." With tears in her eyes, she said, "Thank you for loving us," and making Luke, who was very emotional, had tears in his eyes and told our whole family. It was so hard for him to speak. He looked at Leah, this brave little girl who had changed his life in ways he couldn't even describe, never thought possible. Then he looked at Nicole, who was wiping away her own tears, and nodded to show that he agreed with her. After hearing his daughter's words, Luke sat still for a moment. His heart was full of... The warm light from the Christmas tree made his eyes shine on Leah and Nicole's faces, and he felt a rush of... When Luke looked at the small family he had become a part of, love almost took his breath away. He thought about the night he found Leah for the first time in the playground, and how strict he had been as a guardian officer that night. Luke seemed like a stranger now, so different from the man he had known before. He had to keep his feelings in check. He thought about the long night he had spent looking for Nicole and the fear that had been with him as he tried to figure out what had happened by remembering how shocked he was when he found out that Nicole was his high school sweetheart, and how the revelation had broken down the walls he had built around his heart. Luke thought about the days he had spent with he stood by Nicole's hospital bed and prayed for her to get better. He remembered how happy he was when she finally opened her eyes, how many tears he shed when he saw Leah with her mother again, and how that moment had changed something. He felt it deeply when he looked at Leah, her eyes filled with love and trust. Thought about how much she had taught him. This brave little girl had shown him the strength of hope. He thought that she had long since gone away, but her strength and the healing power of pure love had brought it back to life. Dead the part of him that could truly care for others, love openly, and let others into his heart. Nicole looked at him and gave him a soft smile, as if she knew what was on his mind. Luke felt a warmth go through his chest. As he thought about their past together and the new bond they had made through this, she reminded him of Luke doesn't believe in love or second chances like he used to. His strict personality came back to the surface when he helped Leah and Nicole. He was no longer the cold man he had been for so long. In its place was a man full of love and kindness. Officer Luke was no longer his only name. He was now a friend, a guardian, and a father. As night fell, the soft light from the Christmas tree cast a shadow over the three of them. Leah yawned, and her eyes grew tired. Nicole gave her a soft touch. She was tired, but her smile was still bright. Daughter's hair, and her eyes were filled with thanks as she looked at Luke. Nicole finally spoke up, her voice full of emotion. "I don't know how we can ever thank you enough for everything." "You've done for us," Leah agreed, putting out her small hand to grab Luke's. "You saved us," she said. Luke got a lump in his throat as he looked at them. Her words carried the weight of their shared journey. His heart swelled with love as he thought of them, this little family that had become his own. He took a deep breath and tried to calm down. He was trying to find the right words to describe how he felt. "I thought I was the one," he said in a soft voice. "I wanted to help you, but you've given me more than I ever thought possible." Nicole and Leah listened. They looked at Luke closely as he spoke. "Not before I met you both. I was just going through the motions of... But that was all I had in life. My job. I didn't have love or family. And I'd lost my drive. Luke paused and swallowed hard. "But you changed everything," Leah told him as she squeezed his hand. "You've given me love," Luke said, his eyes shining with tears that hadn't dried. "You've taught me what it means to be a family member, but most importantly, you've given me a new reason to wake up every day." Nicole wiped a tear from her face. "Now I feel like I have a reason to be here every day to make a difference," she said. Luke's words moved Leah so much that she stood up and hugged him tightly. "We love you," she said. "Luke," Leah whispered. "Luke, hug her back." Luke did, his heart full to the brim. Luke looked over at Nicole, who nodded in agreement, her eyes filled with tears. After the holidays, he went back to the police station with a lighter heart than he had felt in years. He carried a small frame. As he walked into his office, he took the picture Leah had made of the three of them with him. He stopped for a moment to think. Carefully looking around the once-and space with fresh eyes, he hung the bright drawing on the wall across from him. The bright colors on his desk stood out against the dull grey of the office, just like the way Leah and Nicole's clothes had. Add some color to his life. Luke took a step back and smiled a little. Praised the child's art, Officer Johnson, Luke's longtime co-worker, popped his head in the door. "Hey, Luke, welcome back." He smiled and asked, "What's that new thing on the wall?" Luke smiled even bigger and said, "That's a drawing Leah made for me." He said it with pride in his voice as Johnson walked into the room. Looking at the image of Leah, the little girl you helped get back with her mother, Luke nodded and felt warm. "That's something special," the Whistler said low. "You've really made a difference in their lives," spread across his chest. "They've made a difference in mine too," he said. As the day went on, more of Luke's co-workers realized that he wasn't as stern as he used to be. His sadness had been replaced by a quiet happiness. He smiled at everyone and looked at them with a new spark that hadn't been there before. During his lunch break, Luke looked at the drawing again and thought of Nicole's thankful smile, his laughter, and the sense of connection he felt at their Christmas dinner, for Luke felt truly satisfied with his job for the first time in his career. It wasn't just about following the rules anymore, it was about making a real difference in people's lives. Luke looked forward to his visits more and more as the weeks went by. He would pull up in front of Nicole and Leah's simple house every Saturday afternoon, his heart full of love. And joy. One time Luke got there to find Leah waiting for him on the front door. When she saw him, her face lit up. The steps to greet him, Officer Luke, and she ran down them quickly. Luke laughed as he got out of his car and waved. "Hey, kiddo," he said. Leah smiled at him and gave her a gentle hug. "How have you been?" She grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the house. "Are you making cookies?" she asked. The kitchen smelled like freshly baked cookies, and Nicole stood there with her hair pulled back. A flower on her face, she smiled brightly as Luke walked in. "Luke, it's so great to see you," she said. Luke felt a flutter in his chest as she wiped her hands on her apron. "Good to see you too, Nicole," he said softly as they sat at the kitchen table with milk and warm cookies. Luke was amazed at how easy everything seemed. Leah talked about her week at school, and Nicole listened carefully. Luke would sometimes catch his eye and smile, as if he knew what he was talking about. Later, when the sun went down, Luke was on the back porch. Leah was inside with Nicole, deep in a new book that Luke had brought her. Nicole said in a low voice, "I never thought I'd have this again." "A family," agreed, knowing exactly what she meant. "I didn't either," he admitted, "but here." For a moment, they sat in quiet warmth and watched the sky turn pink. Orange. "Thank you, Luke," Nicole said all of a sudden, her voice heavy with emotion. For everything, Luke looked at her with soft eyes. He told me not to thank you because you and Leah have given me so much more than I could have asked for. As Luke drove home that night, he thought about the trip and how far he had come. What brought him here? The police officer who had been alone before now had a family, not by blood, but by something just as strong: love and care. If you like the story of Officer Luke, Leah, and Nicole, I chose this next story because I think it will touch your heart. Please don't miss it. To watch it, just click here.